Hey guys, how are you?
Hey guys,
What's going on?
good. Locked up at home.
Yeah, we got a new face on this week. Curtis Zackery, welcome to Agency Exposed.
Man, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you guys jump in too, but I just wanted to welcome you. And what we want to talk about today is this whole idea of this forced rest, this forced downtime that we're all experiencing. And I know you've written a book on that. I'm going to let you talk about that in a minute. But I want to really open a can of worms today and talk about what many of us are going through, struggling with, enjoying, a little bit all of the above. And so, Ken and Brad, how are you guys holding up? Do you feel trapped? Do you feel rested? What's going on in your minds right now?
Well, I'd say right now it's day by day. Some days I feel stressed. Some days I feel relaxed. And just trying to take it day by day versus trying to look too far in the future. My tendency is to try to go in the future, and I'm just trying to focus just on today and let tomorrow have its own way. And I think I have enough strength to get through the day. I have enough strength to get through tomorrow, and then just take it day by day.
You're held up inside too, right?
I am.
So we're doing this over video on Zoom, right? Because as appropriate for this time, just in case you're listening, because it's gonna be an audio podcast, right? But so Brad, you're in your. Where are you?
I'm in my home office right now.
Okay.
So yeah. Well, actually, there are better places to be if you want. But right now, I'm just to say, just so the listeners can see, I put actually a tropical background behind me to say that I'm actually in the tropics, but I'm really not.
Yeah, I can't. If I had $1 for every time that I've been on a Zoom call and someone has done that, I wouldn't have to worry about the stimulus package.
There you go.
My kids are on Zoom for school, and they're actually the teachers told them, "Do not change the backgrounds. Do not change the."
Yeah, exactly.
I hope that was appropriate because actually that's where I'd like to be. I always say my happy place is like surfing in Bali. I just want a nice Bali vacation, just simple, be on the beach every day, surfboards, nothing else. That's the ultimate vacation for me. But,
that's amazing.
yeah, so locked up under separating ourselves from society right now, and it's feels weird still. I know we have another 30 days that we need to kind of isolate ourselves, and we'll all get through it.
It is weird. I am like you guys. I'm at home in my little home office, and it's been an interesting time. I got to be honest with you. There's a lot of challenges with this time for me, and we're going to get into basically this idea of rest. This is actually, for me, something that's been bubbling underneath the surface in some ways, and we can get more specific in a few minutes. But, like Brad, like you said, mood or whatever you want to call it, like mindset is in a few different places. Like it's almost diametrically opposed for me. Like there's a lot of me that is extremely, that I'm excited about, like the change that we're going through. There are parts of it that are really exciting. There are some benefits to being there, and there's some downsides, but there are benefits to being locked in a house with your family. I've got 3 little kids, and so it's me, my wife, and 3 little kids. Oldest is 7. They may run in here at any given time, and if you hear someone screaming in the outside, it may sound like someone's getting killed, but I assure you that's not happening. But what's been cool about it is I have no doubt, and maybe this is a good sort of jumping off point, but I have no doubt. And I don't know what your situation, if you're listening to this, is. I don't know if you have a family that you're with, or you might be locked alone, so this may not be relevant exactly. But I do think whatever it is, you're going to look back on this time and remember it. There's no way you won't remember this, for the rest of your life. for me, there are pains inside of that, but I know that like some of the things, like being locked in the house with all the kids and everything, like there are going to be times that we'll look back and we'll remember this time, and there are formative things happening through it, and in our family, and I think that's a good side of it, if you're intentional about that. And it's been top of my mind to be intentional about that. Now, you may not have may not have the same type of situation as me, but whatever that situation is, like, I think if you're intentional about being in it, and I think there are a lot of benefits to it. And that's what we're going to kind of talk about here today, right? We're going to talk about, okay, we're being forced to pause. Hey, we're here, whether you like it or not. Like, how do we use that? Is there a good in it? Like, is there power? I think the title of this episode might be The Power in the Pause. I don't know. That's like one idea here, but I think there's power, and there's really good in this idea of stopping. And it's probably something, I know for me, it's something that I've probably wanted to do. It's probably why I'm excited in some ways. Like, there's a big bunch of business challenges, which we should talk through. We talked about it last week. We were on a live call where we talked through all the literal challenges and things that we're trying to navigate as business owners, and as leaders. But there's excitement for me, and I think some of that comes from, hey, I don't know how I would ever get out of the routine, and now I'm taken out of the routine, and it gives me a chance to just reassess and adjust things, and I think there's something exciting about that.
Yeah.
So Curtis, what are your thoughts as you think through this and hear us talk? And I know you're talking to a lot of different people, but I'd love to hear, your work, your research. You've written about this. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, the conversation is multifaceted, and there's no questions that it impacts different people in different ways. I think Ken just alluded to the fact that there are some single people who are experiencing this whole thing in a different way than those of us who, as you might have even heard, my little man came running in while we were doing this. It's just a different reality inside of where we are, inside of what we would call this forced rest. And so understanding that there are different manifestations, different facets, though seemingly obvious, is still important to say that everyone's experience is going to be different than other people's experience inside of it. For some people, there's an inherent sense of relief. There's almost a natural flowing into what this time represents. And for others, there's a complete and total agitation around things that are completely uncomfortable inside of the situation. And I think it's because of our personality disposition. Some of that has to do with vocationally how we come into this time. I think for those who are business leaders versus people who would consider themselves employees, maybe they have different understandings of what this time represents. And so as I'm listening to you guys talk, I think you all are representing just even some of the natural thoughts that most listeners, I think, would find themselves connecting with. I think one of the things that I talk about often, especially when it comes to business leaders, is this idea or this premise that it's possible for us to work from rest. And I understand when I say that, especially before this season of time where there's this forced rest and it takes more intentionality, I usually get one of three responses. The first one is either they think it's some kind of joke that would even be possible because work and rest don't even seem like they can have any sort of connection. Or someone might hear that and go, yeah, I think that'll be the session that I'll skip at a conference, or maybe I'll skip that podcast because I'm sure it's some sort of like hokey kind of idea that, doesn't really apply to real life. Or when I get down to it with real people, I think it's almost this feeling of there being water in a desert. If that's even possible, that maybe work and rest, they could work in tandem, that they could be in rhythm together. That's a hopefulness that we all hold. And I think the gift of what this time represents for us is the establishment from the beginning to build into that way going forward. And so I think for that to happen, it will take some true intentionality. And I think one of the things that's really important is to note that before this time even jumped off, the statistics around disillusionment and burnout inside of employment centers were staggering. I mean, Harvard Business Review did a study, and in their study, they discovered that 3 out of 5 employees exhibited some sort of burnout or some sort of low engagement. And so this statistical show is not something that is surprising to anyone. I mean, everyone is hoping for some time away, hoping for some time to relax. But when it really presents itself to them, I think we find ourselves responding in different ways. So just initially, I just think the understanding that we're all experiencing some tension inside of the moment, both with good aspirations and hopefulness, but also some real angst and some real unsettledness. I think it's completely natural that would be true.
CZ,
go ahead, Brad.
CZ, why do you think that, like for me personally, why do you think I feel like I have to be working all the time? Like I feel guilty, especially during this time, that I need to rest because I feel like I have to actually be hyper engaged at this point to make sure a ball doesn't drop. Like first of all, why do I feel guilty? Number 2, how you talked about work and rest at the same time. When there's a lot of anxiety for people at this point, especially people who own businesses or people who are employed that they think they may lose their job, how at this point can you feel like you're holding up a lot of balls, or you got your family here, you're trying to create some sense of normalcy for your family. We're all trying to work from home. We got kids running around, all that stuff. How do you do that and rest at the same time? Can you give me some like practical things that you think I can work on?
Yeah, absolutely. I can suggest things, and if they feel like they apply, I think definitely.
No, Brad will do them. I don't know about Bob, but Brad will do them.
Started your push-up challenge.
Sorry.
You know that?
But yeah, I think one of the first things that comes to mind is we have this inherent belief that our only valuation is really connected to the things that we produce or that we make. And I know that that's a hard line for many of us because in our industries, in business, it's a bottom line type of thinking. The results that we bring in are connective to usually the amount of work that we put in. But when it comes to individual guilt and individual feelings of angst connective to a desire to maybe want to rest or thinking that we're resting too much when more work can be done, to be quite honest, I think we need to come to a place where we understand that our value is beyond what we can make. We are more than what we produce. And for many of us who have wrapped up so much of our identity, worth, and value in the things that we do, straight up, that's just a hard prospect because so much of our life has been structured till this point to be sustained, formed, and founded on the results of our work. What I think a lot of people are starting to realize in this forced rest is the dynamic of what it means to be connective in relationship, to be connective in family, to be connective in all of these things that on the surface or maybe in our language have been meaningful in the way that we've expressed them. We've been able to keep them at bay or compartmentalize because really, even though we can say they're important to us, the manifestation of our lives, if we look at the way we've been living before this forced rest, don't really match the valuation. Really what we have truly given our lives to are the outputs, the things that we make and the things that manifest from our hard work. So it's not to say that it's not right for us to work hard. That's absurd. We need to work hard. We need to put our hand to the plow. We need to do everything we can, especially as leaders, being servant leaders, ones who can give more than even who we're asking to give of, right? And I think that's important, but at the same time, I think the true balance starts to come in when we see the value of what valuation of things other than work, how that can contribute to the work that we make. I think the second thing that you said that really kind of stands out to me is I think we've equated rest and laziness, and that's just not true. I think we've made a mistake in our culture in connecting laziness to rest because The other thing that's not true is rest and leisure aren't always the same thing either, because we take rest and throw that into the soup with binging on Netflix, just vegging out, just not disengaging from life totally. And that, I don't think, is a fair thing to do, because rest, in a sense, is so vitally important for there to be true and beneficial productivity. So the one analogy that I use often is, I remember having a conversation with a friend who was a truck driver, and he did those long hauls all the way across the country. I was living in California at the time, and he used to take these long hauls all the way down to the tip of Florida in Miami, and from Sacramento. And I would ask him, like, how do you even do that? Like, how do they regulate all that? And he would talk about the strict regulations around rest before you drive. And you couldn't drive a certain distance without resting a certain distance. And then he also talked about how there were these shady companies that found ways around these restrictions. And they would set these expectations for the driver to get their load to the place which wasn't reasonable within the restrictions of the rest. And he talked about these times when he's worked for those places where he'd be driving and he'd be seeing hallucinations in the middle of the road. Like, he'd be driving an 18-wheeler truck with tons of stuff in the back and thinking there are things in the road, and he's swerving and going crazy. The reason I think that's an important analogy is, we all know we prefer for that dude to be rested. If we're driving on the highway next to him, the thing we know is if he crashes that truck, the implications aren't just on him. He's not the only one who's affected. The fallout is anyone who's in that sphere. So if he doesn't have the proper rest in order to do that work, when he gets to that work, he's going to start making mistakes. The work is going to be sloppy. He's actually not going to be able to give himself fully to the work. And so I think that imagery really comes back to why not only should we not feel guilty for resting, but I think with intentionality inside of our rest, it's going to actually make us more productive. I've talked to a lot of leaders in this season of time who've said, yeah, I actually have realized I've done more work in less hours with more time with my family than I have ever in my career. Now, that didn't happen just on accident for some of these guys. And then for others of us, we're going, man, well, I don't know. Some ladies are going, yeah, well, hopefully it'll fall on me. No, I just think with intentionality and evaluation of rest in its proper place, I think that can change some of our outcomes.
That's good.
Yeah, that's a great point. And your analogy of the truck driver, I'm just sitting here thinking of, just like we wouldn't want that truck driver to crash and hurt or kill people, or, cause the load to be late, or to kill himself or whatever. Without rest, we can crash our businesses, we can crash our relationships, we can crash our families, our marriages, we can crash a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's not unlike when you're saying that, you reminded me of, it's a lot of the principles. Actually, what's surprising and also in some ways a little depressing to me is a lot of the principles that produce really great long-term results are countercultural, some would believe counterintuitive, and things that you may even feel shame for or be shamed for. And rest is one of those. I think some of those other ones, we talk about them a lot, I've mentioned them, are being a healthy, stable business, putting your business health. And again, if you're listening to this, we talk about like putting your business health before your clients. Now that sounds crazy. I don't mean that in a bad way, but if you're not healthy, then how could you possibly help someone become healthy, right? If you sacrifice your health in order to, and I'm talking about financially, we've discussed this before, like how can you possibly help someone else grow? It would be actually short-term thinking on their part to want you to be unhealthy in order to serve them. Yet we almost feel guilty about that when it's actually the best long-term result. The same is true for health, like your physical health. I prioritize my physical health, and even about a year and a half ago, I started doing it to the point where I used to bump it for things that were like revenue generating activities, like meetings and those kind of things. And I realized for me, that was actually, again, a short-term thought. So I actually started prioritizing it and making it so that was more important than the other things I did. And I would just schedule around it. And if there was a conflict, that would be the thing that wins, because I know that's how I'm at my best, so that I can produce my best. I think rest is in that similar category. As a leader, like, I know I feel this, like, you have a never-ending to-do list, and it's not even a leader, like anyone, right? Like anyone who's part of a team or just in life, like you have a never-ending to-do list and you're overcommitted. That may even be in social scenarios, right? Like that may have nothing to do with your business. How can you possibly give your best to people if you don't prioritize pausing and having rest through that? And it's interesting to hear some of those things you said, CZ, about like people saying they're more productive now. I mean, I think in a lot of ways I've been more productive now. I've also been tempted to work a lot more right now, which we can talk about.
Yeah.
One of the things that I feel is, to riff off of what you're saying there, Ken, is that I feel like, because I'm not running a mile a minute and having to drive my car to one meeting, go here, another meeting, I feel like I'm more present. So the stuff that I'm doing, I just feel way more present. Even though we're distant and I'm not in front of you, like even with this call, my mind is present, because I don't feel like, oh, I got another meeting right after this. I got to run. I got to do the blah, blah, blah. The kids got sports and I got to take this. There's nothing for me to do. I might have another business call after this, but I'm not having to, do all these errands and go everywhere. And it's just like half of the things I had to do to survive, my daily survival task, have been limited to probably 50%. And I've shed some of those things out of my life. And now I actually feel so much more present, which is really cool. And I feel like that, like what you guys talked about, I'm going to feel disappointed once this all ends, if I get right back into my routine and I haven't learned anything from this. That would be a shame. And so my goal is, maybe I need to look at, CZ, you can help us ways to document today so that we don't forget how we're feeling right now, so that when we are released into the wild, we don't just forget about this special time.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple things that you guys said that are really important. And to speak to that, I think another misnomer or an inequality is busyness being equal to productivity. Busyness and productivity aren't synonymous. And I think, again, we've made ourselves believe that that's true. So to your point, Brad, I think when we're moving around, when we're running to another meeting, when we're always in the car, we got to hurry up and go here. I mean, we even see people at the coffee shop, and somebody will say, "Hey, man, how you doing?" And, "Oh, man, I'm so busy, just running around." And we wear it as a badge of honor, and people celebrate that, because for you to be busy,
hustle and grind, right?
Yeah, it's a hustle and grind. And I think to that end, I think we have this, again, inherent belief that our productivity is attributed to our value. So if I'm doing a lot of things, I'm communicating I'm important, and not just from a sense of I'm trying to show everybody who I am and what that means, but more significantly, to my own understanding of my value, I'm saying, because I'm always moving, I'm being productive. And I think, to your point, and back to what you were saying, Ken, like the thought that both you are in some ways being more productive, but also there's a temptation to do more work. I think the intersection of that is understanding that just being busy doesn't mean you're productive. The reason those guys or those ladies are finding that they're getting more done in this time is because busyness is no longer dominating their workday. There are a lot of things that interrupt the rhythm of what it means for us to actually get work done. And those interruptions aren't always just checking social media or distractions that are unhealthy. I mean, just the action of doing our day, driving from place to place, all those things, they interrupt what it takes for us, if we're intentional, to be productive. And so I think the thing that we start to gravitate toward is so there's that one side, like you're saying, where, man, I feel like I'm more productive, but also I'm more tempted to do more work. I think sometimes when we ask the why behind the what, we'll really get to the fact that it's not even so much that I want to do more work. It's really because, if I'm being honest, I just want to be busy, because being busy makes me feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And when I'm
it
not,
makes you feel secure, right?
yeah, it makes you feel secure, because you're going, man, I know what it feels like to always be running, moving, shaking, doing. But if I'm going to rest on the merit of the value of my work, my productivity that has come from rest, then I'm actually saying, I'm not trusting that I'm only important because I have all these meetings. I'm trusting that the work I'm actually putting out matters, and I'm going to let this work be the thing that leads out. That, quite honestly, is kind of terrifying for us, because we've not operated that way in a long time. When you were young, hungry, starting your company, trying to get it going, it's like, man, I got to make this beautiful thing. But when you're just managing a business, you're managing other leaders, you're leading leaders, it's harder for us to go, man, the thing that I make is the beautiful value that I have to offer inside of my work, from this place of me understanding that what I contribute to it is significant. So yeah, it's a really beautiful thing.
You have some real practical tips or practices that you can give a lot of business owners and a lot of our listeners, depending on their personality types. And we've talked about this before. There's a guilt that goes along. There's a fear of missing out. There's a uncomfortableness in resting, especially if those of us who work from home. There's things that we can't wrap our heads around and our hands around of, gosh, I'm enjoying this, but I can't get away from this anxiety or, this fear of things are slipping through the cracks, or I feel guilty when I go play with my kids. I think this is forcing us to face those things. What are some good practical practices and tips that you could offer?
Yeah, this is the stuff that I would love to talk about for another 2 hours if we had time, but just really.
Brad said he's got no meetings after this.
Right, yeah.
I'm at home. I can sleep on the floor.
That's right.
Put my pajamas on. No, I'm just kidding.
That's it, man. Well, I think the first thing that I would say to that is, one of the things that I found that helped me in shifting my heart and my mindset to be able to give myself permission in these times to find rest is it's almost like tricking your brain, but it's not really tricking your brain. It's actually telling your brain the truth. One of the things that we'll tell ourselves is, if I want to go play with my kids, like you just said, or I want to go for a walk, or I want to just take a break. We think that that's not doing something, but we need to tell our brain that is doing something. You are doing something when you do that. Now, that seems kind of like an obvious statement, but it's not to the people that you're referring to, people who are driven, work-centered thinkers, to go, man, I'm going to play with my kids. It feels like that is me not doing the stuff that I'm supposed to do. But when you realign your valuation, you are doing something when you are playing with your kids. You're being intentional and building up something that has extreme and total value to the output that you have as a leader to the rest of this work. So it's not that you're not doing stuff. It's you being intentional about what you are doing. So there are 3 words that I think are really important that kind of go as a framework for me. Then I'll give some practical tips. The first one is intentional. We've said that a bunch. Ken, you said it. I think it's a word that as leaders we are very comfortable with, because it takes intentionality for us to say, here's the thing that needs to get done, and we need to get it done. So whether it's me or my team, somebody needs to get it done. So intentionality is extending with specificity what needs to be accomplished. I would say, as we approach this restful time, we need to approach it with intentionality. So not just saying, all right, it's coming at me, I'm going to take it as it comes, which is what you're saying induces guilt and even shame connected to it. But if I can be intentional, even in small ways, I'm not talking about scheduling out every single moment of your day, but just saying, here are the 3 things that I would want to see happen in my life today, not connective to productivity, but even connective to rest, and having intentionality with it. That way I'm actually showing up to it and I'm getting results and response that I feel like I have a hand in, and it's not just taking over my life. The second thing I would say is the word substantial. I think sometimes we think, man, if I'm just going to have rest, I'm just going to show up to it and it just is what it is. And whatever I get from it, it's fine. I would say let's have aspirations that maybe are restful time that we're going to give ourselves to, whether it's for a half hour or 2 hours or a day, whatever. We're going to show up to it thinking that this can be substantial in my life. This can be something that can truly build me up. It can be replenishing. It can be meaningful, whether it's a connection with your kids or a book you've been wanting to read or you've been waiting to paint a picture. Like, you can come to this saying, I'm going to give myself to this and hope that it will be a substantial time, not passively, but engaging rest. That's an actual thing that's possible. And then I think the last one is sustainable. So we don't usually incorporate that when it comes to things that we want to add as rhythms into our lives. We're good at the intentional. Yeah, I'm going to show up. I'm going to go to the gym every day, 6 a.m., right? I'm going to get up and do my push-ups. You're not going to any gym right now, but you get up, you do your push-ups. But I'm going to do it every day, 6 a.m. The clock's going to go off. But that first day that you feel a little tired and you don't show up at 6, we're like, you know what? Forget it. Because we don't think about sustainability. We're good at intentional. We're good at a substantial change. But we're not really good at thinking, can I see this going forward into the future? And the reason I think the sustainable one is so important is we're all hoping that this new normal that gets established, this restful posture that is contributing to our work, we want to carry that back into our offices, right? So if I can start to think, how can I sustainably set things up? That can now lead not only into, can I do this while I'm here, but can I see myself, I would even ask yourself to ask this, can I see myself doing this or incorporating this into my life once I'm back in the office, once I have my commute again, and that may even shape some of these intentional things. So real quickly, I would say the first thing I think is a really great tool and has helped people in ways that I couldn't even have imagined when I first thought of it. But it seems so simple, but yet I think it is profound. We are all very good at to-do lists. You probably have like a whiteboard in your home offices that has checklists and little boxes next to it. Or you got your whole, like whatever, your app on your phone. I would suggest that we make a to-don't list. Like, I don't know if you've ever done this before, but it is extremely powerful if you write down the things and make clear to yourself what you don't want to do, like what you don't want to give yourself to. Because you're realizing in this season, there are things that you've realized are barriers to your productivity. And now some of those barriers have been removed. Other things are cropping up because you're back home and you're going, man, I have accessibility to, like, I can go to the fridge every 5 minutes if I want to. I can be distracted if I have work to do with my kids or with my whatever. And so I think making a to-don't list is very powerful because you're actually putting word and thought to the things that you're trying to not only accomplish, but also the things that are barriers to what you're doing. I think another thing that is really helpful, and if you have a little bit of extra time, is to do a time budget. And so this time budget is no different than what I think a financial budget would be like. I think one of the biggest things that we'll learn from this is stewardship is extremely important. And stewardship's not just a financial term. Like if I say to my wife, yeah, I think we're spending a little bit extra money on coffee, and so I need to kind of watch my spending, she would say, yeah, you're right. And so we kind of have the conversation and maybe that affects the way that I spend my money going forward. But it's a whole nother thing if I print out our last 3 bank statements and she circles every single time that she sees a coffee shop on this bank statement, adds up the number, writes down that number, puts it on a sticky note, and I stick it right on my computer. Now
you don't hang out at
I have a full awareness of that number now, and that number is going to affect the way I spend my money. So I think time is the same thing. And because we have all this time, I want you to think about how have I spent my time? Maybe even in the last couple of days that you were in the office, and you look down at your time budget and you see, because how often have you said things like, oh, I would do that if I have more time.
Right.
And now we have all the time in the world. And weirdly enough, we're not doing the things we said we would do if we had more time. And what I think it finally comes back to, and this is the last thing I'll say, is we give our lives to what we value. There's no question about it. There's absolutely complete and total certainty in my life that what I care most about, I will find a way to give time, attention, and money to. And so I think when we realize the aspirational ideas that we've held around books that we want to read, more time to dedicate toward artistic pursuits, or time with our bride, but yet we're saying we don't have time. I think what I've recognized is when we do something like a time budget, we see what we truly value, not the words that we say, but what in our heart we're actually expressing. So those are just three things that come to mind. But man, I would love, like I said, to talk more about any of those things at any time.
Yeah, I love the to-don't list. I think that's really smart, because I know that it's real easy during the day for me is to start off my day with a to-do list, go through and check all those things off and feel like, man, I nailed it today. And yet there was a lot of stuff and a lot of things I engaged in that I probably could have gotten even more done, or could have made wiser use with my time. So I think even though, we're measuring how many tasks we got done, what we're not measuring is the ways that we wasted our time.
Right.
And I guess that is the fine line that we're talking about here. It's like, where do we plug in rest into that? Where do we plug in downtime? Where do we plug in, return on our time spent?
What I'd like to say too is that rest for one person isn't the same as rest for another person. So what I've been doing mentally, and I need to do this more intentionally, is that there's certain things in my day that exhaust me. They take energy from me. I don't feel rest. Another person might say, man, that's exactly what I need for rest. I need to be around people more. I need to interact. And for me personally, being around too many people all day long as an introvert, I always say I'm an extrovert. I'm really an introvert, but I act like an extrovert. It takes a lot of energy from me. I notice I need to be doing something completely polar opposite and give that polar opposite just as much time, which fills me back up, which gives me rest. So for every hour I do something that drains me, I need to do an hour in the day that fills me up. And that could be, taking a walk. It could be praying, meditating. It could be spending time with my family, whatever, right? But for some reason, for everything that drains, I need to do rest. Otherwise, what happens is I find myself so off balance. It's because all of my time is just draining, to the point where I don't have anything left to give. And when you get to that point, and we all been there so many times, you feel it starts to weigh on you because you don't feel good about yourself. You don't even feel productive, even though you're spending time trying to do something. It's like you're trying to work, but it's just not getting there. And so, for me, I think just making that list of things that drain me and things that I can do that fills me up, and make sure that I'm intentional enough and have enough discipline to make sure that I'm protecting myself and filling myself up. It's like, going to the gas station. We would all love to drive our Porsche 180 miles an hour, right? All the time. But there's times we got to pull over, stop the car, and fill up the gas tank, right? And we have to do that in our lives. And so, I would just, I don't know, maybe this is a time right now. I know for me, when this kind of things happens where we're forced to stop, a mirror goes right in front of my face. When I look at that mirror, I start to look at myself. Quickly, I examine myself and go, okay, it's weird that I'm not quite bored yet, because I don't really get bored. But I find myself going, what is this all I've been doing? And is it really worth it? Like, if all I've been doing is just be an engine all day long, every day from morning to night, and has it produced anything of fruit? Where for me, I think this is the greatest time to look at a mirror and go, okay, not only do I need to do something with my time in the future, I need to rechange things, but I need to look at myself and go, how am I the most healthiest? How am I the best person I can be?
Yeah.
And, start to take those notes.
some of the things as you're talking, I'm thinking like the to don't list. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. That's really interesting. And one of the areas that it comes to mind for me is like, it doesn't have to be activities. It could be, especially right now, I would actually say maybe start with where your mind is, right?
Yeah.
What am I not going to let enter my mind? What am I not going to think about? What am I not going to worry about, or whatever that may be? It's my opinion that the news should probably be on your to don't list, or, no one knows what's going on right now. So, as much as anyone, you listening. So, you don't really need up-to-date information on the death count, or, what's, the changes in whatever. And so what I'm not going to do, I think also what occupies your mind is part of that. I think that's really interesting.
Hey, Curtis, can you talk a little bit about, we talk on this podcast a lot about abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset. And I think there's something underneath that we all have to deal with, that I think a lot of people are dealing with, is, this idea that you mentioned earlier, and you touched on it, of when we're resting, when we're downtime, we're losing important time, connections, relationships, priorities. And yet what people are finding is, oh, I'm getting more done while I'm in this, and I've let go of a lot of other things, i.e. meetings and travel and taking kids here and sports and all the things, all the hamster wheel that we're told this is what we have to do to be successful or productive. But doesn't it speak to this idea of, we think that there's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough productivity, and yet maybe we're learning and being forced to learn maybe there's a different way and a better way.
Yeah, that's well said. I think one of the things that's been a thought thread over the last probably about year or so, and has been extremely accentuated during this current season, is, for the most part, I think we as people are very good at what's, but we're not very good at whys. I think when it comes to building, making, doing, going, even in our personal spaces, whether it's on social media or interconnection, the things that we purchase, the vacations that we take, the businesses we build, the ways that we structure our teams, the meetings that we have, like all of those things across the board. We're really good at coming up with what-centered things. But when we start getting into the why we do the what, most of the what's that we have established don't really have a firm foundation. And I think that that's what's starting to crumble in this time. Brad, you referenced there being a mirror that gets thrown right up into your face during this time. Ken, you've talked about some other things around like what's coming into your mind. Like, there's a natural filtration that is coming as a result of this situation. We are being made to rest. And as a result of that, the things that we have set up as what's are no longer options. Whether part of your business is large group gatherings, part of your business is, travel all the time, part of your business is whatever. And you have all of these different components. What you're being forced to ask in this time is, are these what's actually vital for the productivity of my company? And what we're starting to realize, and I think is unsettling to some of us, is we've been doing a lot of what's for a long time, and we've not really ever stopped to ask why we do the what's. But when we take the time to ask why, we start to see, oh, maybe we can still move forward without that thing, and maybe we can still get this done without all these meetings. And I think that that's what people are starting to recognize. So I think, to your point, when we start to ask why, and I'm a big fan of the why-centered way of thinking. When we start to ask why, it gives us the answer to the question, to what end am I doing this? And I think so often we don't have the opportunity to take that time because either we've always done it this way, so therefore it requires this type of intentionality, or if I ever do think about stopping and trying something different, it could upend or usurp everything that I think that I've built this whole thing on. Now that we're all forcibly caused to rest, we're able to truly ask why. Now, the answer to some of those questions are going to lead to some really hard things because it will require some sacrifice. It'll require some shifting. Some of that's being forced upon us, whether through financial means, whether it's restructuring teams or the way that we do business. Other people are asking whys, and they're going to be able to change things about their personal rhythms. But I think that that's really what it comes down to is so often we lean on our what-centered way of thinking rather than asking why. And I think now we're kind of brought to that place.
CZ, you wrote a book called Rest, right?
Soul Rest, yeah.
Soul Rest, sorry. So tell me,
Right.
yeah, I have the book. Tell me,
Clearly.
tell me what made you write it, and what was the pinch or the inspiration for it?
Yeah, so writing the book was never something that I had intended as a pursuit. I didn't set out to say, man, I'm going to be an author and at all costs I'm going to do this. It really was the result of having experienced what I feel like a reformational experience in my life. I had a season of time. I was living in the Bay Area during this season. My wife and I were doing some really good, purposeful, meaningful work. We were working with a lot of folks who were in recovery situations and homeless friends who were looking for a place to live. We had people who were coming out of the sex trafficking industry that we were running alongside of. And the work we were doing was really purposeful and meaningful and good work. We were neighboring well inside of our community, volunteering at the local Boys and Girls Club. And, you know, it was just a good season of time with good, meaningful work. The problem was I started to feel like the work that we were doing just wasn't sustainable. I was only about 1.5 years into it, and I was starting to feel like, man, I can see burnout on the precipice already because it was so true that the work was purposeful and meaningful and good. But the problem was my ability within my own strength to keep pulling that work off just wasn't going to be sustainable. And so my identity, my worth, and my value connective to that work was so intertwined that, you know, we found ourselves at times 3 a.m, somebody would knock on our door looking for a place to stay or some food or whatever. And, you know, rather than figuring out how to be intentional inside of figuring out rhythms of rest and work, I would just do it all, and I would do it all in my own strength. And then that was really exhausting. I think coupled with that, my wife and I experienced loss through miscarriage a couple times in about a 7-month period. And the second time was further along, and it was emotionally, physically taxing on both of us. And I think that, coupled with that other struggle of identity, worth, and value inside of what I was doing. And then the final piece of that, feeling like we were kind of on an island. You know, we were in this place where we were starting to feel exhausted. We were really tired and grieving, hurt. And, you know, I would turn to different people and they would say things like, well, you're the person that we would normally look at for help. So we don't know how to help you. We'll just give you some space. And so I think those 3 things together ended up being more than I could bear. And so I told the group of guys that I was working with at the time, I wasn't really sure what was next, but I was just going to have to take a step toward finding rest. And so my wife and I moved in with her fam. We had then had a son, and so he was about, I think, 6 months at the time. And so, man, we just kind of set out on this journey to start asking really hard questions about those things, identity, worth, and value. And so on the other side of that year-long period, I felt like I'd learned a ton through that journey, and that's really where the book kind of came from, to hopefully help other people who are kind of walking through similar situations.
You think your book can be applied to a business perspective?
Yeah, I think what it all comes down to for all of us, I kind of referenced at the very beginning of our conversation. I think our value is much more than what we have attributed it toward. I think so many of us have found our value in the things that we make, do, build, and produce. And really the book is centered on this idea of trying to discover where our true value is found. How do we find and understand our true worth outside of the things that we can make and do? For me personally, I think part of my journey was understanding my position connected to God and what that looks like in my life. And so for me, one of the big questions that I've had to ask myself is basically, is God enough for me? Do I feel like he's enough, or do I feel like all of my life is built around trying to produce, make, and show how important I am to for me, God, you know, and for others it may be to the community or to the world or to whatever. But for me, that was an important question. And I think that question truly is universal to all of us in some form or fashion. And I think to that end, maybe the book would be helpful to different folks.
I mean, we've talked about before, how I have a couple, just in what you were talking about, like you mentioned why, and then you just mentioned your connection to God and your purpose and all that kind of stuff. And we've just discussed this before, how even if you just look at it from a practical benefit sense, how knowing your why inside of your business is an anchor to what you're doing. And we're seeing that right now, right? Like you mentioned CZ, you said, hey, if all you do is your what, then if your what was trade shows right now, and every trade show has been shut down, and that was your business was your what, then your business is done, right? Let's just be honest, like that, it's done. For people listening to this, a lot of, like, let's say you have an agency or marketing agency, something like that. If your what is Facebook ads or paid marketing or branding, whatever it is, that can still be taken away. If that's ever taken away, you're done. Why allows you to pivot. It doesn't matter. You can execute the why in multiple ways. And if you step back and make it about your why, it becomes your anchor to how you do it, or the what that you do is just dependent on the resources that you have in the situation and how the best way to accomplish it is. So I think that's an interesting point I wanted to mention. I think it's an anchor. And then the second anchor, like you just mentioned, which I think is key, is like, okay, when you're looking at, we've talked about like how, our business, serves a greater purpose. I'm a person of faith, and I believe that one of the practical takeaways of that is that, hey, I don't have to worry about this ultimately because there's a greater purpose. I think for anyone listening, like when you think about a connection to a greater source, a creator, in any way, like that takes a lot off of your shoulders and also allows you to, again, if you put your worth in what you do, or someone once told me, I have a business coach, and I was having some angst about a few things, and when he dug into it, he was like, what is it? Well, there were we were doing our best to serve these clients, and they were just very difficult people to make happy. No matter what we did, we couldn't make them happy, even though we were going above and beyond and doing what we were doing and doing it well. It was giving me angst around, and he was like, why in the world would you ever put your self-worth in anyone else's hands, let alone your client's hands, right? That needs to be in a place that is more defensible than your client or what you do or any one thing. And when you start to, and I think that's an interesting, if you do nothing else, I think one of the things is, like, if you do some soul searching around, where do you place your worth? Like when it comes down to it, is it in all your activity? Because if it is, now that's being challenged, right? Is it in your clients or your business? If it is, then that either that's being challenged now or it can be challenged. Are you living vicariously through your kids? If so, then that's going to be challenged. Like, figuring that out actually gives you a really interesting center and an interesting anchor. And I've just noticed that in my own experience. And I think you had mentioned that there, and I bet that's one of the big challenges that are happening right now for most people is, again, your what might be taken away. Your self-worth might be challenged because you can't be as active as you normally are. And if that's the case, then you're more susceptible to being in a really difficult place right now. I want to ask this question, especially now. So you're an author, you're a speaker, and you've actually pretty world-renowned speaker. You advise leaders of businesses and organizations and nonprofits and churches, and you're also a pastor. You help coach people through implementing restful routines. You call them rhythms, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Like through their daily activity, like and working from a place of true rest. You do that. You've done that for the longest time in a situation where people weren't forced to rest. So you had to convince them you had to get them to stop. Okay. So now people are at a stop in a lot of ways. If not your to-do list, then definitely your schedule and your activity list, right? Like you can't leave the house for most people. And so for some people, they've completely lost their business, their job, who knows what, it might be being challenged right now. What are some, like, you mentioned, and so we already went through some tactics, right? What are some like practices that you can put into place if I'm someone that is overwhelmed, or I'm scared right now, or I'm anxious about what's going on, no matter what my situation, maybe in daily life, are there some boundaries? Are there some things that I can implement or I can do schedule wise or health wise or whatever that may look like that I can put into action, maybe even starting tomorrow?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones, it's an idea that I've been kind of discussing here lately with a couple of different folks. And it goes back to the permission, I think, which is really vitally important if you're going to get into a place where any sort of productivity in rhythms would even be. You have to give yourself the permission to be able to say it's okay to do it. And so one of the ways that I've been talking about this is like, just imagine if you were planning on going to the beach, for vacation, and you had been talking with your kids, and all they've been wondering about is how they can get in the water. They can't wait to get in the water. I just want to go in the water. And then you drive 8 hours, get down to the beach, you get there and the water's closed. You get there, you've driven all the way, you've planned all the stuff, you rented
like
your...
It probably is right now.
Yeah, exactly. The beach is closed. So you show up and you get there. And so there's like this very real choice where you can either, because of your desire to have focused your vacation on being in the water the whole time we're together, I can either, with my kids, sit where that new yellow caution tape is that's closing the beach and stare at the water all day for 10 hours that we're there just going, man, I wish I could be in that water. I hate that we can't be in the water. Man, they said we can't go in the water, so now we can't get, And what's interesting is I can truly give all of my energy, attention to the fact that I can't do this thing. And then that produces angst and frustration and then anxiety. Well, I wasted all this money. And so then I have 5 days worth of me complaining about all the things that I can't do, instead of trying to reallocate that time and steward that time to go, well, I didn't choose for that to be closed. That is closed. That's not an option. There's nothing I can do, even busting through that tape to get into that water. So now, that being the case, I can either be filled with angst, frustration, anxiety, connected to this thing that I can't control, which has been shut down without my say, or I can say, now that that's the case, I have to steward the reality of what I have right now. So I would say that's kind of some of the thinking that helps me in a time where, in my own allocation of rest and rhythms, like you said, as a daily practice, I think is necessary. We need to go, okay, I know that this is the worst circumstances ever for there to be a forced rest. I know that there are a lot of issues that we need to be paying attention to as a world, and we need to steward staying home, doing our part, paying attention. Where can we donate? How can we help? All these things that are going on, we need to pay attention to them. That being said, this space that we have in front of us is in front of us, whether we want it or not. So now the question will become, am I going to use all of that time in that space? And this goes back to, Bob, I think what you were saying, which is we're going to get to the other side of this, look back with angst and frustration because we're going to go, man, I wasted that opportunity. There's going to be a lot of people, even people listening right now, if you're not careful, you're going to get to the other side of this and you're going to go, man, I wish that I would have spent more time of intentionality using this space that was there in front of me rather than watching the news and focusing on the negatives. I know that those things are there and present. We don't need to ignore them. What I'm saying is, in light of those things, how can we steward it? So I think starting there helps us to find permission. I think some of the practical rhythms that have really helped us is, one, setting an intentional time of meals and gathering together as a family. Weirdly enough, one of the things that we say is, like, we can't really sit down as a family and have dinner because we don't really have time. But yet we have all this time, and mostly the time that we have will allow the slipperiness of the day to kind of just go, oh, well, you grab some food here then, and like we'll sit in front of the TV and eat that there and whatever. Now that may be a silly thing to some, and maybe even for you if you're single right now, I would say having a time of intentionality to sit down and just be still before a table. Put your phone aside, whether that's with your family together or by yourself, and just kind of allow yourself to be fully present in the moment. Now, I will say that is terrifying to some of us. Like the idea of being still in any way is almost more than we can handle because our phones and newspapers and news cycles have become so a part of our lives that to turn them off for a minute, we're scared to figure out what our thoughts are doing without that engagement. So I think regular meal times is really helpful, not only for connection with family, but also for full presence within yourself inside of the rhythms of your day, at least starting with one meal. Maybe it's breakfast, maybe it's dinner. For us, it's dinner. And then we try to really incorporate some intentional times together for every section of those intentions. I said earlier, what are the three things that we would want to do to be intentional about our rest? So if we're saying we want to spend time with the kids playing, we want to have some school time for the kids, and we all want to have some individual time to do work, like put some intentionality around it. It doesn't have to be rigid to where it's like it has to be exactly 45 minutes, but at least put some brackets there to make sure that it happens. And I think just practically those two things, and I think if I could stress one more than any, if you can find a way to introduce some stillness and some silence into your day, you're going to realize the why question that you're wanting to answer is going to start popping up when you allow your true thoughts, your true self to come forward. Because when you're not distracting it with an audiobook or a podcast or a news feed or socials or background noise, you're going to be confronted with the reality of where you are. For some of us, honestly, like I said, that's terrifying. But I think where we can get to is a true sense of what we need rest for in our lives.
Some people, tell me if you would agree with this, but like I imagine a lot of people, their life is almost on autopilot in a bad way. Like they're just pulled along by a schedule that they don't necessarily even know why exists anymore. And now that may have changed, but also the idea of thinking about that could be scary for some people, right? Yeah. But it sounds like, again, right now is the time to sort of, you have the blessing, the good side of this, the opportunity is you have the blessing of rethinking things, right? You have a bit of a reset.
Right.
And so I would say maybe if you, and I've done this before and I probably should redo this, but like maybe if you listed out like, what are the priorities of my life? Like, what do I want to, whatever, be about, accomplish, whatever that might be. Could be business, could not. Like, what are those priorities? And then does my calendar align with that?
Yeah.
Like that to me, that's like one filter to go through because again, like even if, you have, I guess the world has kind of given us a free pass on resetting right now. That's where I see a benefit right now for me, even as a business. Like you kind of have a free pass to try stuff, to reset stuff. Like, so I'm trying to personally in my life not miss that, because I think that actually is a huge opportunity, and I don't know if everyone is aware of that, but I see that as a massive opportunity, because I think one of the things that keeps us in our routines that may not be effective is simply the shame of changing it.
Yeah.
You know, and so now you've gotten the free pass on resetting. It's kind of like you got to go back to high school or whatever. You know, you don't get to pick your family, but I was going to go in a weird way place. Sorry. And so you get you get that free pass. So I mean, I think figuring out those priorities and then aligning your calendar is one. Another one is that for me is like just having a routine that puts the right boundaries on things. And again, I think about this in ways that how can we take this into when life comes back the normal way? We don't want to just fall back into that. We want to get back into that in a better place, right? And so now you're almost put into the fire because you're at home probably, and your desk, the place you work might be 2 feet from where you sleep. And so it would be really easy to just be in this odd place. If you handle your routine and put some boundaries on your life, that might be, no phone for, whatever amount of time after you wake up or before you go to bed. That could be that I know people that I'm sure haven't changed in 2 weeks, because that's a real temptation, right? But getting ready the way you normally would and optimizing your day, not just working fluidly throughout the entire 24/7, right? But like actually having some boundaries, that structure based on your sort of priorities, I think could provide benefit now. And I know for me, I'm thinking about that, like providing benefit for when we go back. Like when we go back, I'm even considering how do we take, like maybe, we have a team that's all, mostly in person. We do a lot of remote stuff, but like, I'm thinking like maybe we should have 1 or 2 days completely remote, because I'm seeing some benefits in what we're doing right here. But but for a lot of people, I imagine it's massively not beneficial, right? Like if you don't have those disciplines in your life that might have been on autopilot set by somebody else before, then you might be waking up at 10 a.m. You may be eating every 5 minutes or whatever because the fridge is right next to you. Like I think if you don't have those boundaries now, that would be bad for you. But creating them now and having those disciplines instilled, and kind of you have the opportunity to exercise that muscle. Now you can start looking at it from, okay, when we go back, how much better can I be about, at that time? And that's what's really interesting, I think, for me.
Curtis, how can people, if they want to learn more about you, get your book, see what you're doing, how can they connect with you?
So social stuff, it's just at whoiscz. And you can go to curtiszackery.com and there's some stuff there. You can get the book there, little reading plan things and stuff like that. But you can always email me as well. It's just cz@findrest.org. Pretty straightforward for you right there. But any of those ways are great. And again, just this conversation is what I feel like is my life's work. I feel like I'm supposed to dedicate all of my time to serving people like yourselves who are trying to figure out how to steward their leadership in their life, their work, and their rhythms, and just to serve as a sounding board, but also just a voice to maybe nudge in some different directions that can help us to think differently about what rest in life looks like.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. And, I think we've all picked up a few things here, and we really appreciate you taking some time out of, I would say your busy schedule, but that's not appropriate anymore.
That's right.
Thanks for permission. I'm going to go take a nap now.
There we go. Come on. There we go. I like it.
I think, Brad, you need to do what Ken said and change your clothes, because I think you. Oh, I know. I don't want to see what's. I've been the same underwear for a week now.
Boom.
All right, guys. Any last words?
Until next time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Stay healthy. Stay intentional. Thank you, guys.
Talk to you guys later.
Get rest. Bye.
Bye.